Welcome back, everyone, to the Daily English Practice channel. Whether you are a longtime listener or, just joining us for the very first time, we are so glad you're here. So I invite you to just sit back and prepare for an incredible journey today.
Yeah, thanks for being here. We have a really fascinating topic lined up for you.
We really do. Today we're doing a deep dive into a piece of literature that's, honestly, most of you probably encountered in a high school classroom. We're debating F. Scott Fitzgerald's iconic 1925 novel, The Great Gatsby.
Right, and we're doing this in honor of its recent centennial, which is kind of wild to think about.
It is wild, 100 years.
Mm.
And looking at this stack of sources we've gathered, there are so many dark undercurrents here that the standard textbook version usually skips right over.
Oh, absolutely. And just to give you a sense of what we're working with today to uncover those undercurrents, we have an incredibly rich variety of sources to unpack.
Let's hear them.
Well, we're pulling insights from Georgetown University professor Maureen Corrigan, and she has remarkably read the book well over 100 times.
100 times. That is dedication.
Right. We also have details straight from the actual Princeton University archives, where Fitzgerald's original handwritten papers are kept, plus some historical deep dives from the Library of Congress and the Smithsonian.
It's a massive stack.
It is. And to round it out, we're looking at a retrospective from CBS Sunday Morning and a very in-depth master's thesis from Liberty University that breaks down the historical psychology of the 1920s.
That thesis is going to be super important later on.
Yeah.
So our mission for this deep dive is pretty clear. First, we'll tell the captivating story of Jay Gatsby himself.
His rise from poverty to this mysterious wealth.
Exactly. His obsession with the green light and, of course, his tragic pursuit of Daisy Buchanan.
But we aren't just going to recap the plot.
No, no. After that, we're going to pivot into a critical analysis of the text. We'll debate its deconstruction of the American dream, the reckless indifference of the Buchanans, and the spiritual void created by all that materialism.
It's a lot of ground to cover.
It is. So let's just dive into the story of Jay Gatsby. Because the man we know as Gatsby is fundamentally an illusion.
He really is. I mean, he was born James Gatz, a poor farm boy from North Dakota.
Right, James Gatz. Not exactly the glamorous Long Island elite.
Not at all. But he had this massive, restless ambition even as a kid. And the turning point, which the Smithsonian source points out is actually rooted in a historical counterpart, happens when young James Gatz is out rowing.
He's on Lake Superior, right?
Yeah. And he spots this millionaire named Dan Cody on his yacht. He rows out to warn Cody about a dangerous tide that could have destroyed the boat.
That single action completely changes his destiny. Because Cody takes him under his wing, and James Gatz permanently transforms into Jay Gatsby.
Exactly. And the really cool part from our sources is that Fitzgerald actually modeled this encounter after a real-life friend of his named Robert Kerr.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Kerr had basically done the exact same thing. He rowed out to warn a mysterious yachtsman of a dangerous tide and ended up joining his crew.
That is such a great detail. And that moment on the lake is crucial for the book, because it's when Gatsby fully adopts what the novel calls his Platonic conception of himself.
Right. And to unpack that term a bit, a Platonic conception basically means Gatsby didn't view himself as a flesh and blood person with a real past. He viewed himself as this ideal, perfect, mythical figure.
Birthed out of his own imagination.
Yes, he completely discarded reality for this idealized illusion.
And he certainly commits to it. I mean, fast forward to the summer of 1922, and he's living in a colossal mansion in West Egg, Long Island, which is based on Great Neck, by the way.
Throwing those lavish, alcohol-fueled parties.
Right in the middle of Prohibition.
Yeah.
But the sources highlight the really dark undertones of all this wealth.
It definitely isn't old family money.
No, not at all. His fortune is built entirely on bootlegging, and he's in business with this really shady gambler character named Meyer Wolfsheim.
And Wolfsheim wasn't just pulled out of thin air. Fitzgerald heavily inspired that character with a real historical mobster, Arnold Rothstein.
He was the guy who supposedly fixed the 1919 World Series, right?
Exactly. So Gatsby has essentially compromised every moral standard and partnered with the absolute darkest elements of the underworld to get his money.
And it's all for one specific reason. He does it all to catch the attention of Daisy Buchanan across the bay in East Egg.
Which brings us to the famous green light.
Yes, the glowing green light at the end of Daisy's dock. There's that haunting scene where Gatsby's standing alone in the dark and he's physically stretching his trembling arms out toward it. I've always been fascinated by that image. He has millions of dollars, this huge mansion, but he's reaching for something he literally cannot hold.
Because that light represents his ultimate goal. It's his Platonic conception of his own future. but it's this desperate yearning to rewrite the past.
He wants to turn the clock back 5 years.
Right. Gatsby and Daisy had actually met back in 1917 when he was just a penniless soldier. She promised to wait for him while he went to war.
But she didn't. She married the incredibly wealthy Tom Buchanan instead.
So now, 5 years later, Gatsby is trying to use his new illegal fortune to just buy her back and erase everything that happened in between.
Which sets up the heartbreaking tragedy. To summarize the climax of that pursuit, Daisy ends up driving Gatsby's car. She recklessly hits and kills Tom's mistress, Myrtle Wilson, and just completely flees the scene.
Leaves Myrtle there in the road.
Yeah. And Tom, her husband, coldly directs Myrtle's grieving husband over to Gatsby's house, which results in Gatsby being murdered in his own swimming pool.
It is a devastating ending.
It really is. Okay, let's unpack this, because we need to move into the critical analysis portion of our deep dive. For decades, people have thrown these Gatsby-themed parties, drinking champagne and flapper dresses, thinking this is a fun celebration of the Jazz Age.
But our sources argue the complete opposite, especially that master's thesis from Liberty University.
Let's start with the deconstruction of the American dream.
The thesis points out that the novel fundamentally dismantles the myth of meritocracy. Gatsby is sort of the ultimate American everyman.
Right. He worked hard. He was ambitious.
He did everything right in terms of self-reinvention. But his dream was completely fatal. And the reason it was fatal is that it relied on material means to achieve a non-material end.
Ah, meaning he thought he could buy human devotion.
Exactly. He thought purchasing power could literally erase history and secure love.
Professor Maureen Corrigan from Georgetown makes such a good point about this. She notes that the novel does celebrate the dream to an extent, that relentless yearning for something better, but it also shines a harsh light on its deadly undertow.
Deadly undertow is the perfect phrase for it. Gatsby compromised his soul for a corrupted vision of success.
And it drowned him. Which really brings us to the theme of reckless indifference, specifically looking at the Buchanan family.
Right, the old money elite.
The narrator, Nick Carraway, has this incredibly famous observation at the end of the book. He says Tom and Daisy were careless people who smashed up things and creatures and then retreated back into their money.
And we really need to look at Tom Buchanan through the historical context of the 1920s. And we should make it clear to the listener right now, we are impartially reporting on the context provided by our sources here. We obviously aren't endorsing any of these viewpoints.
Absolutely. We're just conveying the history from the research.
Right. So Tom embodies this very aggressive, bullying nativist sentiment of the era. He espoused racist and eugenicist views, which was unfortunately a pseudoscience circulating among certain elites at the time.
He believed America belonged strictly to his specific old stock background, and everyone else was beneath him.
Exactly. And he acts on that sense of superiority by conducting these serial affairs with absolute zero remorse.
And Daisy is marked by an absolute lack of responsibility. I mean, she kills Myrtle Wilson, lets Gatsby take the fall, and doesn't even send a single flower to his funeral.
She just retreats into her money. And it's not even just Tom and Daisy. Look at the side characters, like the golfer Jordan Baker.
Oh, Jordan's fascinating. The sources mention she was inspired by a real-life athlete from the 20s named Edith Cummings.
Right. And in the book, Jordan is marked by cheating in her golf tournaments and just incredibly careless driving. She basically says it's everyone else's job to stay out of her way.
Which raises a huge question. What creates a society of people who are so profoundly indifferent to others?
The Liberty University thesis argues that it's the spiritual void created by materialism. The 1920s saw this massive boom in consumerism.
Right, sudden access to mass-produced goods and wild luxury.
But it created a deep disconnect. People started viewing other human beings not as people, but as disposable commodities.
The contrast Fitzgerald paints is staggering. You have the wild, destructive parties at Gatsby's house. Nick calls it the inexhaustible variety of life. There's a detail where 8 servants and an extra gardener have to toil all day Monday just to clean up the ravages of the weekend.
Just absolute excess.
But then compare that to the utter isolation of his death. None of his partygoers showed up to his funeral, none of his business associates.
They drank his liquor and then completely abandoned him. And what's really interesting is that even the narrator, Nick Carraway, isn't immune to this. The critical analysis points out that Nick's worldview is philosophically materialistic.
I'm glad you brought that up, because Nick always seems like he's judging everyone else from this moral high ground.
He does, but he's philosophically materialistic because he still evaluates the world through the lens of outward presentation. He admires Gatsby's physical pursuit of wealth, the sheer scale of his ambition.
But he misses the spiritual vanity of it all.
Exactly. He fails to see that chasing worldly gain to fill a spiritual void is the exact poison that destroyed his friend.
Wow. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. When you look at the real F. Scott Fitzgerald's life, using the Princeton archives and the CBS feature, the parallel lives are uncanny.
His life mirrored his creation almost perfectly.
He fell for Zelda Sayre, who came from a wealthy family, but she actually broke off their engagement because he was too poor.
She refused to marry him until he proved he could make money. It wasn't until his first book, This Side of Paradise, made him rich that she finally married him.
He literally had to buy his way into her life, just like Gatsby. And he also drew on his first love, Ginevra King, to build the character of Daisy.
He poured his own acute class insecurities right into the text. And speaking of real-life Easter eggs, there is a fascinating detail from the Smithsonian source.
Oh, about the catchphrase.
Yes, Gatsby's famous catchphrase is "old sport." And scholars found that a real-life bootlegger named Max Gerlach actually wrote a note to Fitzgerald.
And he signed off the note with "Old Sport."
Word for word.
That is incredible. And what about the cover art? I know that's another crazy Easter egg.
The iconic cover art by Francis Cugat. It features those sad, disembodied eyes floating over a dark skyline. Fitzgerald loved that art so much before the book was even finished that he told his publisher he had written it into the novel.
That became the giant billboard of Dr. T.J. Ecclesburg, the eyes staring down over the Valley of Ashes.
Exactly. The art directly influenced the story.
So after all this brilliance, we have to debate the devastating irony of how the book was received, because it's a tragic ending for the author.
It really is. Fitzgerald thought it was going to be a huge hit. He expected to sell 80,000 copies right away.
But it sold fewer than 20,000. It was seen as a commercial failure.
He died in 1940 at the age of 44, completely believing he was a failure. The Library of Congress blog notes that in his final year, he earned only $13.13 in royalties.
$13.13 for The Great Gatsby. That is just heartbreaking. He died of a heart attack while eating a chocolate bar and listening to Beethoven, thinking his masterpiece was forgotten.
But then we have the posthumous resurrection.
Yes, how did it get saved from obscurity?
World War II. During the war, the Armed Services Editions printed these small, pocket-sized copies of books for soldiers overseas.
To keep morale up.
Right, and they printed 155,000 copies of Gatsby. The soldiers read it, and it resonated with them deeply. You had all these young men displaced from their homes, dreaming of returning to a better life and maybe a lost love back home.
Just like Gatsby going off to war in 1917.
Exactly. They loved it so much that when they came home, they brought its popularity back with them. And today, it sells 500,000 copies a year as the great American novel.
That is such a powerful redemption story. And it leaves us with so much to think about regarding our own lives.
It definitely does. And I want to leave you with a final lingering thought based on everything we've discussed from the sources today.
Go for it.
If the green light was ultimately just a regular bulb on a dock, completely stripped of its magic once Gatsby finally stood next to Daisy, what are the modern green lights we chase today in our era of social media facades?
Oh, that's a great point.
Are we too just boats beating against the current, trying to buy our way into a past or an image that never really existed?
Wow. That is definitely something to mull over today. Thank you all so much for joining us on this incredible journey. I invite everyone to subscribe, like, comment, and share the podcast on the Daily English Practice channel. We love hearing from you. So let us know what you think those modern green lights are. Remember, there is always more to learn, and we can't wait to discover something new with you next time.